magic makers, and welcome back to the Metaphysical Apothecary. We are your hosts, Megan and Shannon. We are also known as the Scorpio Sisters, and we are here to explore the mysterious, magical, and the arcane.
We will be talking about Christmas cryptids and winter ghosts. Because it is the season.
It's a spooky time of year. The nights are longer, the days are gloomier, and it is the perfect time to explore some monsters, some winter haunts, and where their origins came from.
To give respect and due credit, we said we were going to start with Santa Claus.
Yes, we are going to talk about Santa Claus. When we were doing our planning session, Shannon reminded me there are a million articles out there comparing Santa Claus to Odin, comparing Santa Claus to the actual historical figure of St. Nicholas. There's a lot of really rich Googleable stuff out there, so we're just going to focus on how everything got kind of conflated together and some ways of looking at Santa energy we may not have thought about before.
And you did bring up some really interesting points from a different perspective that might have been lost in time and space.
It was something I was thinking about. When we're talking about Santa, one of the things that always comes to mind is that he leaves gifts for the good children and he leaves coal for the bad children, right? This is something that has been handed down for hundreds of years. It's a cultural given at this point. My thinking was that originally, when Santa was first becoming popular, giving the good children gifts and toys, candy and cake was obviously the thing that you wanted more, but a lump of coal in the middle of winter, especially in the Arctic Circle and Northern Europe, would not have been unwelcome.
No. In fact, it would have been most welcome for a great deal of the children that were being given gifts because they were not in the higher echelons of society.
A lump of coal could mean the difference between being able to cook your food and not cook your food, or stay warm and not stay warm. It was often used in medicine, charcoal was. When you had a sour stomach or you ate something you shouldn't have, charcoal could also be used to draw, write figures, work on mathematical skills. Some of the first pencils were actually sticks that had been charred on one end, and you would just draw either the wall or the floor and rub it away later.
Learning how to sign their names or write their names.
They were given a lesson, basically. So either they were given some luxuries if they had already behaved the way that they were expected to behave, or they were given something to ensure that they were going to survive. Either way, Santa cares about you, everybody.
No matter what you get.
Santa loves you.
He has no favorites.
No favorites at all. Shannon, do you want to give some background as to where Santa actually came from?
Our modern Santa Claus has been configured between Odin, the Norse god of wisdom and knowledge, and kings, war, battle, victory, poetry, runes, you name it, Odin was probably somehow putting his hand into that cookie jar. And St. Nicholas, who was a actual historical figure that lived in Greece or Turkey. I can't remember which one.
My research showed that he was a Greek bishop, but he did travel through that area. So he probably did spend some time in Turkey and Italy and a few other places.
The Mediterranean world. St. Nicholas is a Greek bishop who lived in the 4th century. You can see Odin is the Nordic god that Santa seems to take after the most. He is a god of sacrifices and gift giving. Odin had hung himself upside down from the world tree in order to gain knowledge of the runes or the magical letters. And after he gained that knowledge, mastered it, he ended up teaching and gifting that magic to humans.
So that harks back to the coal gift because it was able to be used for survival and for communication and writing.
It was also a luxury gift because that's not something that humans need. Odin is leader of the wild hunt. We'll talk about the wild hunt a little bit later. The process of the wild hunt and Odin being the leader of it actually does kind of look like Santa in a sled with reindeers.
They sanitized it from being this sort of very frightening tableau of this one-eyed god on an 8-legged horse. Sleipnir has 8 legs.
He does have 8 legs.
To being followed by these wild-looking warriors to a giant in a sleigh with 8 reindeer instead of a spider horse.
Yes, and sometimes he's followed or in company of elves who help him deliver the actual present.
If Odin is the bringer of knowledge, he's the giver of knowledge, which is a luxury, the ability to communicate, the ability to write. Saint Nicholas was the one who brought in the giving of the material gifts. He was famous for giving away his personal wealth to allow people to live and to pay off their debts. He was sainted partially because he was credited with resurrecting the dead so that they could testify against their murderers. Saint Nicholas was also a justice figure, which also folds into the Santa legend because he does enact very gentle justice, but he enacts justice on children.
Mm-hmm. And Saint Nicholas is the patron saint of children in Catholic sainthood.
Both of these figures were sort of folded into the Belsnickel figure, right? When we were talking about it.
Yeah.
So Belsnickel was not so gentle in his enacting justice on children. So he's a tattered Malian figure dressed in raggedy furs. He wanders around with a huge bundle of birch sticks on his back and a sack full of goodies, but it's not a very nice looking sack. So he was sort of a dirty, kind of unwanted figure who masqueraded as this raggedy hobo, but in reality, he was meting out proper penalties or rewards for children's behavior throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. And he's also a figure that you couldn't turn away if he showed up at your door. You may not have wanted him there, but turning him away was very taboo.
Was there a consequence for turning him away?
From the research, you were definitely going to get punished if you turned him away. You weren't going to get cakes or nuts or food or gifts. You were definitely going to get
because those birch sticks weren't fuel for fire necessarily.
Not all the time,
again,
no.
They could be turned into teaching tools, but generally the legend implies that those sticks were for meting out justice rather than anything else.
Definitely meeting out discipline
was the word I was looking for, not justice.
Mm-hmm. So you do have an interesting configuration of 2 very different figures, Odin and Saint Nicholas, being brought together and wrapped into a bundle that resembles Belsnickel a little bit more than either of the 2, because even though the furs get cleaned up, they get colored red instead of covered in coal dust, and there's no necessarily a terrifying mask or grumpy face. It looks very relatable.
Yes, someone that you would actually want to interact with, someone who is happy to see you, someone who is going to be gentle with you. And it's an interesting evolution because it's an evolution of culture as well. So we go from this quest for survival to keep yourself warm and survive during the winter is more of a given. And so Santa, this winter figure, evolves accordingly.
Yes, and starts giving things that have more to do with don't get in trouble over the winter. Here's a toy to play with. Don't get bored. Because boredom usually leads to naughty mischief making and then sometimes leads to someone dying.
That is very possible. Or just general mischief, because originally caroling and wassailing were accompanied by people overturning outhouses, playing other kinds of pranks on those who didn't give them something to drink, which was usually fermented in some way.
Usually, yes. And I am sorry, but if you are tipping my outhouse, that is not mischief making. That is straight up trouble.
But that's what they did.
I really do hope I have something in the house that you can drink.
Exactly. You better have something that they can enjoy. Hopefully coffee or tea is something that'll help them sober up.
Or be part of the Addams family and just pour a boiling vat of oil over them as they stand at the door.
That's very possible. I don't think the Addams family realizes that the rest of us are not as resilient as they are.
I don't think so. I think they are baffled by us not being as resilient as they are.
Why aren't you recovering? Aww.
Oh, well, we'll bury you in the backyard. It's all good.
So, leading off of Belsnickel and his disheveled appearance, and Odin being sort of a very imposing figure, and even St. Nicholas allegedly had a reputation for punching heretics in the face during their trials. We have winter beings, winter cryptids that we call anti-Santas. They're usually disheveled or frightening in appearance, and their sole goal is to punish those who have been wicked during the year. And I think the most famous one is Krampus. So Krampus is most famous for being this huge demonic looking figure, right? He's got ram horns, he's got goat's legs, he's half goat, half demon in the most modern mythology, and he will leave coal and birch sticks at your home, but he is also known to punish wicked children, sometimes by stuffing them into a sack and carrying them to hell.
Or chaining them in a long procession if he's filled the sack already.
This is a very, very harsh way to treat anybody.
Mm-hmm. Especially children.
Exactly. In our research, when we were discussing this, we were talking about, historically speaking, what it would mean if a child was lazy or misbehaved or idle during the warmer months of the year. Because everyone in a family unit was responsible for preparing for the harsher winter months where the nights were so long, where it was snowing endlessly, especially in the area that we're talking about. Krampus was originally an alpine figure, so there definitely would have been very harsh conditions for people to live in there.
Mm-hmm. And a lazy, procrastinating child who didn't bring the hay in before the next rainfall would have destroyed a whole crop of
caused
hay.
Their livestock to starve, which in turn would be ruination for the family.
Because then you might not have livestock for the next season of spring. You also would have starving animals. So even if you wanted to slaughter one to eat during the winter months, there wasn't enough meat on their bones to get enough nutrients from them.
In order to get their children to pay attention to their work, to contribute, whether or not it was a great parenting tool, these stories were put out there to motivate the children to be more responsible, to be more hardworking.
To contribute to the family as much as they possibly can without being sidetracked by nonsense.
Exactly.
When we were researching Krampus, we came across connections with Ceranos.
Yes.
The horned
god of the forest, which Ceranos was native to the British Isles, that area, right?
No, he was native to everywhere that the Celts ever touched, so continental and British Isles.
Which makes sense.
He was everywhere.
Because the Celts were people.
Yeah. And he has horns. Usually they're seen as antlers, but at one point in time, when the Christian faith ended up coming into different areas, they turned his antlers into goat horns.
Or they could be ram horns in some cases as well.
Yeah.
Krampus is likely a figure who was originally a forest god of some kind, who again would either bless a family or not bless a family, just withhold his blessings based on their actions and the ways that they honored him throughout the year.
Yeah, and there's evidence to show that during the winter solstice, Ceranos would go through a death stage. So he would be resurrected in the springtime when the green started coming
Which
down.
may account for the fearsome appearance during winter.
Yes, because a lot of the times they would burn bodies. Burying bodies is not always something the pre-Christian natives did. They didn't necessarily have the room for it all the time, if ever, depending on their culture. Has a fierce look about him because at one point in time he was supposed to be burnt to be resurrected later. Then when Christianity came in, added chains to his appearance, which is why he would now be able to chain children, because they were binding the devil, because he resembled their version of the devil. So
he was definitely conflated with demonic figures.
As most pagan gods were. They were conflated with or demonized because you're not following the church.
That's kind of where we get Krampus from. He's a maligned alpine god, but additionally, he's a teaching story to motivate children to ensure that their families have what they need to make it through to the next spring.
Yes. And again, sometimes he'll leave the coal or birch sticks, which could end up being fuel for the home fire, the hearth fire, writing utensils, medicine. So he was leaving behind sometimes lesson geared tools.
Yeah.
As gifts.
And birch sticks, in addition to being able to be used as writing tools, could be carved into things like family icons or effigies of gods. So he's leaving something behind saying, here's something that you can use to honor me. You can refresh your altar to me, and I will walk.
That's all we have on the topic for today. Thank you so much for listening in, and we hope you'll join us again next time. In the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest, and go to our blog for some more witchy wisdom, as well as check out some of our original art on Society 6 for sacred decor and more. Thank you again for joining us, and go make some magic and live your best life. Bye.
Bye, everyone.